I ate alone on my 45th birthday while my wife claimed last-minute client dinner. The irony wasn't lost on me. 17 months of surveillance had taught me that Victoria's client dinners happened exclusively in Suite 5 and 12 of the Fairmont Olympic Hotel, and they never involved actual food. I cut into my store-bought birthday cake, the kind with frosting so sweet it makes your teeth ache, and pulled out my phone. The message was simple. Send my regards to the man in Suite 512. 15 minutes later, she ran in, still in her party dress, a black number I'd bought her for our anniversary. Mascara smeared down her cheeks like war paint, clutching her phone like she could hide what was already exposed. Michael, I can explain. Can you? I took another bite of cake, savoring the moment more than the artificial vanilla. Because I've been documenting your explanations for quite some time now. Fascinating reading, really. You should consider a career in creative writing. Victoria's face went through a spectrum of emotions. Shock, fear, anger, then back to fear. She was always beautiful when she was scared. It brought out the green in her eyes. How long have you known? Her voice was barely a whisper. 17 months, 2 weeks, and 3 days. But who's counting? I gestured to the empty chair across from me. Sit down, Victoria. We need to talk. She remained standing, her designer heels clicking nervously against our hardwood floors. This isn't what you think. Really? Because I think you've been sleeping with Senator Richard Ashworth, presidential frontrunner and married father of 3, in a hotel suite paid for by his campaign funds. I think you've been feeding him information about my work you believe involves simple IT consulting for defense contractors. I think you've been planning to leave me once his divorce is finalized and his presidential campaign gains momentum. Victoria's knees buckled. She grabbed the back of the chair for support. But here's what you don't know, I continued, my voice as calm as a weather report. You don't know that I'm not actually an IT consultant. You don't know that Senator Ashworth is compromised by Russian oligarch Konstantin Volkov. You don't know that you've been unknowingly recruited as an asset, and you definitely don't know that you're being slowly poisoned with thallium because you've become a loose end. The color drained from her face completely. Poisoned? Michael, what are you talking about? Those headaches you've been having? The hair loss you blamed on stress? The nausea you attributed to guilt? I pulled out a manila envelope from under my placemat. It's all here. Lab results I had done from samples taken from your hairbrush. Medical analysis. Timeline correlation with your meetings with Irina Volkov. Konstantin's daughter, who you think is just your new Russian friend from yoga class. Victoria collapsed into the chair. This is insane. You're scaring me. Good. Fear might keep you alive long enough for me to fix this mess. I slid the envelope across the table. Everything's in there. Photos, audio recordings, financial records, medical evidence. Enough to destroy Ashworth's campaign and put Konstantin Volkov in federal prison for the rest of his life. She opened the envelope with shaking hands, her eyes scanning the documents. Michael, how did you get all this? Because I'm not Michael Patterson, mild-mannered IT consultant. I'm Michael Patterson, former NSA cyber operations specialist, current freelance intelligence contractor. The defense work I do? It's not fixing their computers, Victoria. It's hunting people like the ones who've been using you. The silence stretched between us like a tightrope. Outside, Seattle's eternal rain drummed against our windows, and somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed, an appropriate soundtrack for the death of our marriage. What happens now? Victoria asked finally. Now? Now you're going to help me destroy them all. Because if we don't, you'll be dead within a month, and I'll be framed for your homicide. My IT office was actually a sophisticated intelligence operation disguised as a small tech consulting firm. Located in a nondescript building in South Lake Union, it housed enough surveillance equipment to make the NSA jealous and enough computing power to hack into most government systems. Not that I would ever do anything illegal, of course. Victoria sat in my secondary chair looking like she'd aged 5 years in the past hour. The medical cocktail I'd given her would counteract the thallium poisoning temporarily, but we needed the full antidote, and that was locked away in a Swiss medical facility controlled by Irina Volkov. Explain to me again how you know Irina, I said, pulling up her file on my main screen. Yoga class at the Four Seasons. She seemed lonely, new to the city. We started having coffee after class. Victoria's voice was hollow. She asked a lot of questions about you, about your work. I thought she was just being friendly. Friendly. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Irina Volkov, daughter of a Russian oligarch worth approximately $12 billion, was being friendly at yoga class. The screen showed Irina's real background. Stanford MBA, former Goldman Sachs analyst, current orchestrator of her father's American political influence operations. And according to my sources, planning a coup against Daddy Dearest. She's not working for her father, Victoria. She's working against him. You weren't recruited by Konstantin, you were recruited by his daughter. She's been using you to get to Ashworth, using Ashworth to get to classified information, and using all of it to build a case against her own father. Why would she want to destroy her father? Because she's tired of being Daddy's little asset. She wants to be the oligarch. I pulled up financial records showing massive transfers from Konstantin's accounts to various American shell companies. She's been slowly moving his money into accounts she controls. When she's ready, she'll hand him over to the FBI, claim asylum, and emerge as a reformed Russian businesswoman with a tragic backstory and 12 billion reasons for the U.S. government to protect her. Victoria stared at the screen. And I'm just collateral damage? Worse, you're a witness. You can connect her to Ashworth, Ashworth to her father, and her father to the money. Dead witnesses tell no tales. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. We need to talk. And speak of the devil, I muttered, showing Victoria the message. What do you do now? Now I go have a conversation with the Russian princess, and you're coming with me. The meet was set for Pike Place Market, public, enough to discourage violence, crowded enough to disappear if things went sideways. I equipped Victoria with a wire and a GPS tracker disguised as a fitness watch. If this goes bad, I told her as we walked through the market's maze of vendors, run to the nearest police officer and show them this. I handed her a USB drive. Everything's on there. Irina was waiting at a coffee stand, looking like any other Seattle professional in her designer raincoat and expensive boots. She smiled when she saw us approaching. Michael, so wonderful to finally meet Victoria's mysterious husband. Her accent was slight, carefully modulated. Victoria has told me so much about your work. I'm sure she has. Shall we find somewhere more private to chat? We walked to a quieter section of the market near the flower vendors. The smell of roses mixed with the Seattle air's perpetual dampness. You've been busy, Irina said without preamble. Surveillance, medical testing, financial investigations. Very thorough. I'm a thorough guy. Question is, what do you want? I want to offer you a job. She smiled, and for a moment I could see the steel beneath the beauty. My father has become problematic. His methods are outdated, his approach too crude for modern American politics. I represent a new generation of Russian-American cooperation. By cooperation, you mean you taking over his empire. I mean bringing legitimate Russian investment into American markets, free from the corruption and violence that has plagued such relationships in the past. She handed me a business card. I could use someone with your skills. And Victoria? Victoria has served her purpose. She's free to go, with my gratitude and a generous severance package. Irina's smile never wavered, assuming, of course, that she remains discreet about our friendship. And if she doesn't, the smile finally faded. I think we understand each other, Michael. That's when I noticed the men, 2 of them, positioned at opposite ends of the market corridor, trying to look casual. Professional surveillance, but not quite good enough to fool someone with my training. Your father's men? I asked. My father doesn't know about this conversation. Those are my men, and they're here for your protection, not as a threat. How reassuring. There's something else you should know, Irina continued. Senator Ashworth is planning to eliminate both you and Victoria. He believes you've discovered his relationship with my father and considers you a threat to his presidential ambitions. He's arranged for an accident to befall you both within the next 48 hours. Victoria's face went white. He would and he will, unless, of course, we remove him from the equation first. I felt the familiar rush of adrenaline that came with operational planning. What did you have in mind? Seattle General Hospital, at 3 a.m, was a symphony of beeping machines and antiseptic smells. Victoria lay in the emergency room bed, her skin pale and clammy from the accelerated thallium poisoning. The temporary antidote I'd given her was wearing off faster than expected. How much time does she have? I asked Dr. Sarah Chen, the toxicologist I'd called in as a favor. With this level of contamination, maybe 6 hours before organ failure begins? The antidote you gave her bought us time, but we need the full treatment protocol, which is only available in Zurich. How did you know that? Because the person who poisoned her made sure it would be. I looked at Victoria, who was drifting in and out of consciousness. It's all part of the game. My phone rang. Irina. I heard about Victoria's condition, she said without preamble. Such a tragedy. If only there were someone who could help. Cut the act, Irina. What do you want? A partnership. I have the antidote Victoria needs. You have the skills I need to neutralize my father and Senator Ashworth. Simple exchange. And if I refuse, then Victoria dies, you're framed for her homicide, and I continue with my plans using other resources. But I'd prefer to work with you. You're quite impressive. Through the hospital room window, I could see two men in suits talking to the security guard at the main entrance. Not hospital administration, their posture was all wrong. We have company, I told Dr. Chen. I need you to move Victoria to a secure room and put the floor on lockdown. Medical emergency protocols. Michael, what's going on? Someone's here to finish what the poison started. The men had split up, one heading for the elevators, the other for the stairs. Professional tactics for a hospital infiltration. I had maybe 3 minutes before they reached Victoria's floor. I grabbed a wheelchair from the hallway and burst into Victoria's room. Road trip, sweetheart. Michael? She was groggy but conscious. What's happening? Remember when you said our marriage lacked excitement? I lifted her into the wheelchair, medical equipment and all. Careful what you wish for. The elevator dinged as we reached the hallway. I spun the wheelchair around and headed for the service elevators at the opposite end of the floor. Behind us, I heard shouting, the security guard trying to stop the men, probably unsuccessfully. Hang on, I told Victoria and pushed the wheelchair into a full sprint down the hospital corridor. The service elevator was occupied by a maintenance worker who took one look at us. Me in my street clothes pushing a woman in a hospital gown with an IV bag flying like a banner, and decided he had somewhere else to be. Basement, I said, hitting the button as the footsteps echoed in the stairwell behind us. Michael, I think I'm going to be sick. If you're going to vomit, aim backward. Maybe we'll get lucky and hit our pursuers. The elevator opened to reveal the hospital's loading dock. Perfect. I pushed Victoria's wheelchair toward the emergency exit, setting off alarms that added to the general chaos. My car was parked 2 blocks away. Victoria was fading fast, and the men from upstairs would be down here within minutes. Time for improvisation. Can you walk? I think so. I helped her out of the wheelchair and wrapped my jacket around her shoulders. We're going to walk out of here like we belong, get to my car, and drive to the airport. Airport? Zurich, remember? That's where your antidote is. We made it halfway across the parking lot before everything erupted into chaos. Not at us, that would have been too simple. The rounds were aimed at my car tires, a professional touch designed to strand us without causing a scene that would bring police attention. New plan, I muttered, pulling Victoria behind a parked ambulance. I pulled out my phone and dialed emergency. This is Michael Patterson. I'm a federal contractor, and there are armed men in the Seattle General Hospital parking lot attempting to kidnap a federal witness. It wasn't entirely true, but it wasn't entirely false either, and it would bring the cavalry running. Sirens wailed in the distance. The men who'd been pursuing us melted away into the night, professionals who knew when to cut their losses. How did you know they'd run? Victoria asked. Because whoever sent them doesn't want police attention any more than we do. This was supposed to look like an accident. Remember? A police cruiser pulled into the parking lot, followed by an ambulance. I helped Victoria to her feet and walked toward the officers. I'm the one who called, I said, showing them my federal contractor ID. My wife was poisoned, and someone just tried to prevent us from getting her medical treatment. The next hour was a blur of statements, medical checks, and bureaucratic procedures. By the time we were clear to leave, dawn was breaking over Seattle, and I had a text message from Irina. Plane leaves SeaTac at 10 a.m. Gate B7. Come alone, or she dies. Looks like we're going to Switzerland, I told Victoria. We? You didn't think I'd leave you behind, did you? Besides, I have a feeling this is just getting started. The flight to Zurich gave me 12 hours to plan, and Victoria 12 hours to recover. The airline medical kit contained enough supplies to stabilize her condition temporarily, and the first-class cabin provided enough privacy to brief her on what we were walking into. Irina's not just planning to betray her father, I explained as we flew over the Atlantic. She's planning to take over his entire operation. The antidote for your poisoning is leverage. She knows I won't let you die, so she knows I'll help her. And will you? I looked at my wife, really looked at her for the first time in months. Despite everything, despite the betrayal and the lies, she was still the woman I'd married, still the woman I'd promised to protect. Yeah, I said, I will, but not for the reasons she thinks. Zurich Airport was a maze of glass and steel, all efficient Swiss engineering and discreet luxury. Irina was waiting at the baggage claim, looking perfectly at home among the international travelers. You brought her, she said, nodding toward Victoria. She's my wife. Where she goes, I go. How romantic. The car is outside. The car turned out to be a black Mercedes with diplomatic plates and windows tinted dark enough to hide a small army. The driver was built like a professional athlete and had the kind of scars that came from serious violence. Dmitri doesn't speak much English, Irina explained as we settled into the leather seats. But he's very good at his job, which is keeping me alive. We drove through Zurich's pristine streets, past banks and chocolate shops and all the other symbols of Swiss prosperity. The city looked like a postcard, all clean lines and mountain views. Where are we going? Victoria asked. My father's compound, Irina replied. He's not there, of course. He's in Moscow, meeting with government officials about expanding his American investments. He has no idea that his daughter is about to make those investments very complicated. The compound was a fortress disguised as a luxury estate, perched on a hillside, overlooking Lake Zurich. Security cameras tracked our approach, and I counted at least 6 armed guards visible from the driveway. Impressive, I said. My father believes in being prepared. Unfortunately for him, I know all his preparations. We were escorted into a sitting room that looked like it belonged in a European palace, all antique furniture and priceless artwork. Irina poured herself a glass of wine and offered us the same. The antidote first, I said. Of course. She pressed a button on an intercom, spoke rapidly in Russian, and within minutes, a man in a white coat appeared with a medical case. Dr. Kozlov, Irina said. He's been treating thallium poisoning for my father's organization for many years. Occupational hazard, you understand. The doctor administered the antidote to Victoria with professional efficiency. Within minutes, color began returning to her cheeks. She'll need follow-up treatment, he said in accented English, but she should recover fully. Excellent, Irina said. Now, Michael, shall we discuss our partnership? That's when the alarm started blaring. What the heck? I started to say, but Irina was already moving, pulling a pistol from her purse with practiced ease. My father's security system, she said. Someone's breached the perimeter. Through the window, I could see muzzle flashes in the darkness. Professional assault. Coordinated and precise. Your father's men? I asked. No, these are Americans. Irina's face was grim. Senator Ashworth has decided to clean house personally. The sitting room's windows exploded inward as automatic tools fire raked the building. I grabbed Victoria and pulled her behind a heavy wooden desk as bullets chewed through priceless artwork. There's a safe room, Irina shouted over the noise. Follow me. We low-crawled across the room toward a bookshelf that swung open to reveal a hidden passage. Behind us, armed men in tactical gear were breaching the main entrance. The safe room was a high-tech bunker with communications equipment, tools, and enough supplies to survive a siege. Irina immediately began working the radio, speaking rapid Russian to someone on the other end. Swiss police? I asked hopefully. Better, my security team. They were off-site, but they're en route. How long? 10 minutes. Through the safe room's monitors, we could watch the assault team methodically clearing the compound. Professional soldiers, probably private military contractors hired by Ashworth to eliminate all witnesses to his Russian connections. There's another way out, Irina said, indicating a tunnel entrance. It leads to the boat dock. We can escape by water. Or we can fight. She looked at me with something like respect. You want to fight 12 professional soldiers with whatever tools we have in here? I want to end this. Running just means they'll come after us again. Irina smiled, and for the first time, it looked genuine. I was hoping you'd say that. The tools locker contained enough firepower to outfit a small army, assault rifles, grenades, body armor, and more exotic items I didn't immediately recognize. Your father was definitely prepared, I said, strapping on body armor. My father survived the fall of the Soviet Union and the rise of Putin. Preparation is a way of life. Victoria grabbed my arm. Michael, this is insane. Let's just run. If we run, they'll never stop hunting us. The only way this ends is if we make it too expensive for Ashworth to continue. I turned to Irina. What kind of communications equipment do you have? Satellite uplink, encrypted channels, internet access? Why? Because I'm going to destroy Senator Ashworth's presidential campaign while we fight off his assassination squad. Multitasking. The next 20 minutes were a blur of violence and technology. While Irina and her returning security team engaged Ashworth's soldiers in a running firefight through the compound, I used the safe room's equipment to upload every piece of evidence I had about Ashworth's Russian connections to news outlets across America. Audio recordings of his conversations with Konstantin Volkov. Financial records showing campaign funds used for personal expenses. Photos of him entering Suite 512 with Victoria. Video of him meeting with known Russian intelligence operatives. By the time the chaos ended, Richard Ashworth's political career was over. It's done, I told Irina as we surveyed the damage to her father's compound. Ashworth's finished. The story will break in about 6 hours, and by tomorrow, he'll be facing congressional hearings instead of planning presidential campaigns. And my father? That's up to you. I've got enough evidence to destroy him too, but I'll hold on to it as insurance. You help us disappear, and Konstantin Volkov gets to live out his retirement in Moscow instead of a federal prison. Irina considered this. And Victoria? I looked at my wife, who was sitting on the compound steps, still wearing the hospital gown under my jacket, looking like a refugee from someone else's war. Victoria and I have some things to work out. The flight back to Seattle was quieter than the trip to Switzerland. Victoria slept most of the way, her body recovering from both the poisoning and the adrenaline crash. I spent the time planning our next moves and monitoring the news coverage of Ashworth's downfall. The story had broken exactly as I'd planned. Every major network was running the audio of Ashworth discussing classified information with Russian contacts. His campaign headquarters was surrounded by reporters, and congressional leaders were already calling for investigations. He's finished, I told Victoria's. We descended towards SeaTac Airport. Whatever happens next, Richard Ashworth will never be president. What about us? She asked quietly. I don't know yet. The truth was, I didn't know what I felt about Victoria anymore. The betrayal still stung, but watching her nearly die had reminded me why I'd fallen in love with her in the first place. People make mistakes. The question was whether we could move past this one. Our condo looked exactly the same as when we'd left it, but everything felt different. The birthday cake was still on the table, now stale and forgotten. The envelope of evidence sat where I'd left it, no longer needed. I should shower, Victoria said. I still smell like hospital antiseptic. While she was upstairs, I checked my security systems. 3 attempted break-ins while we were gone, all by professionals who'd been careful not to leave evidence. Ashworth's people probably looking for anything that might incriminate their boss further. My phone rang. Unknown number. Mr. Patterson, this is Agent Jennifer Walsh, FBI. We need to talk. About what? About Senator Ashworth, Russian oligarch Konstantin Volkov, and a woman named Irina Volkov, who seems to have disappeared from federal surveillance. I'll meet you tomorrow. Downtown, FBI field office. Tonight would be better. Tonight, I'm having dinner with my wife. Tomorrow. I hung up before she could argue. The FBI could wait. Victoria and I had 17 months of conversation to catch up on. She came downstairs wearing jeans and a sweater, looking more like herself than she had in days. Who was on the phone? The FBI. They want to debrief me about our Swiss vacation. What will you tell them? The truth, most of it anyway. I gestured toward the kitchen. Are you hungry? I could make us something. You mean you could order something? You don't cook. I've been learning. Turns out I had a lot of free time while you were having client dinners. We ordered Chinese food and sat at the same table where this had all started. The birthday cake was gone, replaced by containers of lo mein and sweet and sour chicken. I need to tell you something, Victoria said as we ate, about why I started the affair. You don't have to. Yes, I do. She put down her chopsticks and looked at me directly. I found out about your surveillance. Not the recent stuff about Ashworth and the Russians, but the older surveillance. You've been watching me for years, Michael. Tracking my movements, monitoring my communications, cataloging my activities like I was a subject in one of your operations. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. Victoria, I found the files 6 months ago. Every phone call, every email, every lunch with friends. You had it all documented, cross-referenced, analyzed. I felt like a prisoner in my own marriage. The silence stretched between us. Outside, Seattle's rain continued its endless percussion against our windows. You're right, I said finally. I did that. It started as professional paranoia. In my line of work, family members are often targeted for leverage. But it became something else, a way of controlling a situation I felt like I was losing. So I found someone who didn't watch me every second of every day. Someone who didn't know my routine better than I did. And walked right into a Russian intelligence operation. Yes, and nearly got myself ended. Victoria laughed, but there was no humor in it. Ironic, isn't it? I was so desperate to escape your surveillance that I put myself under someone else's. What happens now? I don't know. Do you think we can fix this? Before I could answer, the lights went out. Not just in our condo, the entire building, the entire block. Through our windows, I could see downtown Seattle twinkling in the distance, unaffected by whatever had ended power to our neighborhood. That's not a coincidence, I said, moving toward my emergency equipment cache. Michael, what's happening? Someone's making a move. Stay away from the windows. I pulled out night vision goggles and scanned the street below. 3 vehicles parked in positions that hadn't been there when we'd arrived home. Professional surveillance setup, but they'd shown their hand by cutting the power. How many? Victoria asked. She'd found the backup pistol I kept in the kitchen and was checking the magazine with practiced efficiency. Apparently, I wasn't the only one who'd been learning new skills. At least 6 that I can see, probably more. My phone buzzed. Text message. Send down the evidence files and no one gets hurt. A friend. Ashworth's people? Victoria asked, reading over my shoulder. Or Konstantin Volkov's, or Irina's. At this point, we've made enough enemies that it could be anyone. I moved through our condo, activating the security measures I'd installed over the years. Steel shutters dropped over the windows. Reinforced locks engaged on all doors. Motion sensors activated in the hallways. You turned our home into a fortress, Victoria observed. Occupational hazard. You never know when someone might want to have a conversation. The first breach attempt came at the front door. Shaped charges designed to blow the locks without bringing down the building. The reinforced door held, but barely. Backstairs, I told Victoria, leading her toward our emergency exit. The back stairs were supposed to be clear, but as we reached the landing, muzzle flashes lit up the stairwell below us. Someone had anticipated our escape route. Up, I said. Roof access. We climbed to the building's roof as automatic tools fire echoed in the stairwell below us. The rain had turned to sleet, making the roof treacherous and visibility poor. Now what? Victoria asked. Now we improvise. The building next to ours was separated by maybe 8 feet of empty air and a 12-story drop to the street. In the movies, this would be where the heroes make a dramatic leap to safety. In real life, it was where people died. But the building did have a fire escape. Can you climb down a fire escape in this weather? I asked Victoria. Can I what? Trust me. I pulled out a grappling hook and line for my emergency kit. Yes, I actually carried a grappling hook, because paranoia and preparation often look the same, and secured it to our building's roof access structure. You want me to rappel down the side of a building? I want us to swing across to the fire escape on the next building. It's only about 15 feet. Only 15 feet. Over a 12-story drop. In freezing rain. Would you prefer to discuss it with our visitors? The roof access door exploded open behind us. Men in tactical gear poured onto the roof, sweeping the area with tool-mounted lights. Hold on tight, I told Victoria, and we jumped. The swing across the gap felt like it lasted forever. Wind, rain, and gravity all conspired to end us, but the line held, and we crashed into the neighboring building's fire escape with enough force to rattle every bone in my body. Are you hurt? I asked Victoria as we untangled ourselves. I think I'm going to file for divorce just so I never have to do that again. Fair enough. We climbed down the fire escape as quickly as the icy metal would allow. Behind us, our pursuers were setting up their own lines to follow. Professional, persistent, and probably very expensive. My car was parked 3 blocks away. We had maybe a 5-minute head start. Where are we going? Victoria asked as we ran through Seattle's empty streets. To end this once and for all. How? By giving everyone exactly what they want. The FBI field office at 3 in the morning was a fortress of fluorescent lights and government coffee. Agent Walsh was waiting for us in an interview room that smelled like disinfectant and broken dreams. Mr. Patterson, Mrs. Patterson, you both look like you've had an eventful evening. Someone tried to end us, I said without preamble. I'd like to report an attempted homicide and provide evidence of a conspiracy involving a sitting U.S. Senator and Russian intelligence operatives. We're listening. I placed a USB drive on the table. Everything's on there. Audio recordings, financial records, surveillance footage, medical evidence of attempted poisoning, enough to put Richard Ashworth in federal prison for the rest of his life. Agent Walsh plugged the drive into her laptop and began scrolling through the files. Her eyebrows rose steadily as she reviewed the evidence. This is comprehensive, she said finally. I'm thorough. Mr. Patterson, I need to ask you some questions about your background. According to our records, you're an IT consultant with a defense contractor clearance. But the sophistication of this surveillance suggests training and resources far beyond civilian capabilities. I used to work for the government. Different department, different lifetime. NSA? Let's just say I have skills that proved useful in this situation. Agent Walsh closed the laptop. Mr. Patterson, this evidence is enough to destroy Senator Ashworth's career and probably put him in federal prison. But I need to know. What do you want in return? I want Konstantin Volkov arrested and his American assets seized. I want Irina Volkov granted asylum in exchange for her cooperation with federal investigations. And I want my wife and me left alone to rebuild our marriage. And if we can't guarantee all of that, then this conversation never happened, and you'll read about Senator Ashworth's Russian connections in tomorrow's Washington Post. Victoria squeezed my hand under the table. You already leaked it, didn't you? Insurance policy. But I can provide additional evidence that will make the difference between a political scandal and federal charges. Agent Walsh considered this. I'll need to make some calls. You have 1 hour. While Agent Walsh worked her phone, Victoria and I sat in the FBI break room, drinking terrible coffee and watching the sunrise over Seattle. What happens if they say no? Victoria asked. Then we disappear. New identities, new life, somewhere warm with good beaches and no extradition treaties. You can arrange that? I can arrange a lot of things. Advantage of having worked for the government, you learn who to call when you need favors. And if they say yes, then we go home, order pizza, and figure out if we still want to be married to each other. Agent Walsh returned exactly 59 minutes later. We have a deal. Konstantin Volkov will be arrested within the hour. His daughter will be granted asylum and witness protection in exchange for her cooperation. Senator Ashworth will face federal charges for espionage and conspiracy. And us? You're free to go, with the Bureau's gratitude and a strong suggestion that you consider returning to government service. Thanks, but I think I'll stick to marriage counseling for a while. We walked out of the FBI building into a Seattle morning that looked exactly like every other Seattle morning, gray, wet, and somehow beautiful anyway. The city was waking up, unaware that a presidential candidate's career had just ended and a Russian oligarch's American empire had just collapsed. So, Victoria said as we waited for a taxi, pizza for breakfast? Why not? We've earned it. And then we figure out what comes next, together. The taxi arrived, driven by an elderly Sikh man who took one look at us, disheveled, exhausted but holding hands, and smiled. Long night? He asked. You could say that, I replied. But I think it's going to be a good day. As we drove through Seattle's familiar streets, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Well played, Mr. Patterson. If you ever need work, you know how to reach me. I showed the message to Victoria. Irina, probably. You going to take her up on it? Not a chance. I've got everything I need right here. I deleted the message and put my arm around my wife. Outside, Seattle continued its eternal dance of rain and renewal. And somewhere in the city, our old life was ending and our new one was beginning. The taxi pulled up to our building just as the FBI was finishing their crime scene investigation of the previous night's attack. Agent Walsh waved us over. Thought you'd want to know. We arrested 12 men in connection with the assault on your home. Private military contractors hired by Senator Ashworth to eliminate witnesses. They're all talking, trying to cut deals. What about Ashworth himself? In federal custody as of 20 minutes ago, he was trying to board a private jet to a non-extradition country when we picked him up. Victoria laughed. So much for his presidential ambitions. One more thing, Agent Walsh said. We found this in his campaign office. She handed me a file folder labeled Patterson Michael, Termination Authorization. Inside were detailed plans for ending both Victoria and me, made to look like a domestic tragedy. Photos of our daily routines, maps of our building, even a psychological profile explaining how the stress of discovering his wife's affair had driven a former government operative to violence. He really thought this through, I said. Men like Ashworth always do. They just don't usually account for their victims fighting back. We went upstairs to our condo, which looked like a war zone. Bullet holes in the wall, furniture overturned, windows shattered, but it was still home. We'll need to redecorate, Victoria said, surveying the damage. We'll need to do a lot of things. Starting with? I pulled out my phone and dialed our favorite pizza place. Starting with breakfast, and then maybe we can talk about whether you want to stay married to someone whose idea of conflict resolution involves international espionage and tactical combat. Well, Victoria said, settling onto our bullet-riddled couch, it certainly wasn't boring. No, it wasn't. Michael, yeah? Next year, let's just have a normal birthday party. Cake, candles, maybe some friends who aren't Russian spies or corrupt politicians. Deal. But I'm keeping the grappling hook. I wouldn't expect anything less. The pizza arrived 45 minutes later, delivered by a college kid who took one look at our destroyed living room and decided not to ask questions. We ate breakfast pizza while watching the news coverage of Senator Ashworth's arrest and the collapse of his presidential campaign. Think we'll make the news? Victoria asked. God, I hope not. I've had enough excitement for one lifetime. Really? Because Agent Walsh seemed to think you missed the action. Maybe I did, but I missed you more. Victoria smiled, and for the first time in 17 months, it looked like she meant it. So what happens now? Now we clean up this mess, fix our marriage, and try to live a normal life. Think that's possible? With you, probably not. But it'll be interesting to try. Outside our shattered windows, Seattle continued its endless rhythm of rain and renewal. Somewhere in the city, federal agents were arresting the last of Konstantin Volkov's associates. Somewhere else, Irina Volkov was beginning her new life as a protected witness and reformed oligarch's daughter. And in our bullet-riddled condo, my wife and I were eating pizza for breakfast and planning our second chance at happiness. It wasn't the ending I'd expected when I ate alone on my birthday, but it was the ending we'd earned. Victoria? Yeah? Happy anniversary. It's not our anniversary, Michael. It's the day after your birthday. I know, but it feels like the first day of something new. She leaned over and kissed me, tasting like pizza and possibility. Yeah, she said. It does.